Hello, I'm Ralph Rugoff. I'm the artistic director and curator of this 2019 Biennale of Art in Venice. And I'm here today with Margaret and Christine Wertheim, who are artists in the show, and Tomás Saraceno on my left. And I'm going to give a brief introduction, then Margaret and Christine will give a presentation, and Tomás will give a presentation, and we'll have a conversation, and we'll have question time. So if you have questions, just keep them in your mind as the talks go on, and you get a chance to ask them towards the end. One of my main interests in organizing this Biennale was to highlight art's capacity to deal with complexity and to embrace contradictory positions, to use what seem like very, very different methods of research to arrive at answers that might point in different directions at the same time, and not to consider that a problem. You know, I feel like we live in a moment culturally where information bandwidths are shrinking, and there are kind of siloed information channels, and the internet has helped to exacerbate this, where people are only talking to people who think exactly the same way they do. And we get a kind of narrowing of discourse. And we don't get more ideas, we get communication channels that are devoted to a very tiny population of thinking and ideas. So the idea was to show, why is art valuable? And this is, to me, one of the key reasons why it is. And this is something that I also found and drew inspiration from in the writings of Umberto Eco, in particular this book he published in Italy in 1962, in English called The Open Work. And he was really one of the first people to talk about contemporary art as something that's defined by its ability to constantly reinvent itself and to generate new perspectives by developing as an open conversation, as a conversation that was cross-disciplinary, and that really fought against any idea of closure, that really fought against the established norms and categories and conventions that generally structure most of our thinking and how we see the world. We like to put things into little categorical boxes, and we have concepts that describe things, and they're very useful shortcuts, but sometimes we mistake them for reality, and our view of the world then starts to leave out a big part of the picture. So for me, I think this of art, contemporary art, as being a kind of open discursive forum. It's a place in our culture where many, many different disciplines can meet and have a very fertile collision. And I think you would think this kind of thing might happen in academia, in universities, where all these different disciplines sit side by side, but in truth, it seems in the universities, they rarely actually talk to each other. They're all existing together, but apart from each other. And so, strangely enough, art ends up occupying this territory where this is the space where things can come together and create interesting and fertile conversations. One of those, and artists are fantastic, voracious parasites, almost as it were, who are willing to feed off of ideas from all kinds of fields. And I think for a long time we've seen artists who are drawing on work from what we think of as the humanities, from anthropology, philosophy, history, sociology, psychoanalytic thinking, even economic theory. And I think less frequently, but now increasingly, we're seeing artists who are drawing on fields associated with science and engineering. And that might be biology, it could be meteorology, geology, mathematics. And the artists who are here today are artists whose work has drawn on that kind of work. And I think it's very interesting in that it challenges what has been a long-standing division of labor between the arts and the sciences, where the arts, like the other humanities, were supposed to focus on the human experience, the human condition, which is defined as something that's separate from nature and is separate from just machines, the worlds of machines and engineering. And often, I think we always think of it as somehow superior, whereas the world of science and engineering is dealing with this vast non-human realm of everything from subatomic particles to bacteria to cosmic dust. So, and this division is sort of predicated on our concept of what human is. And it's a concept of the human that really is not that old. It's maybe 300 or 400 years old is when it developed. And it's really based on this idea that the human is differentiated from nature and machines, that the human is the realm, that our whole existence is divided into these different domains. The human, which represents kind of intelligence and freedom, the ability to choose, not to be dictated, your behavior is not solely dictated by genetic codes or necessity, versus the realm of nature and the realm of machines, where there isn't supposedly that kind of intelligence or that kind of choice. But more and more research in different fields is showing us that actually that distinction is something that can't be really upheld. And I think the work of these artists is part of a larger questioning right now of how do we redefine what is human and how it actually, rather than being defined by how it's different or better than machines and nature, looking at what they share. And this is quite a complex undertaking that I think will really change the way we see ourselves in the world. So I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers. And Tomás Saraceno, for 2 decades now, has been pursuing his interdisciplinary interests and his utopian ideas about a sustainable future in works where he has collaborated and drawn on the advice of a really wide range of practitioners, from NASA scientists to chemists to engineers to meteorologists, I assume, arachnologists, and has developed a couple of foundations in the process, the Arachnid Foundation and also the Aerocene Foundation, and these are the umbrellas in his work, which his 2 contributions to the Biennale come under. The Aerocene Project, which involves envisioning floating habitats that allow humans to exist in a kind of sustainable, ecological, post-industrial future, collaborating with the air, and we'll see right out here, you can see that project. And in the Giardini, there is Spider Pavilion 7, where Tomás is not only interested in science, and we can talk later about whether spider webs are a form of technology, because I think this idea is very interesting. Is nature something that doesn't have technology, and that's how we define it as being different? Or are there things we could consider technologies in nature? But there, Tomás is also engaging with a form of fortune-telling, which we won't consider a science, perhaps, but some other field. Margaret and Christine Wertheim, in 2005, they came up with an idea which probably they had no idea at that time what it was going to evolve into, which was to make a model of a coral reef, the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, by crocheting forms, and originally using wool, I think, right? And shortly after they began this project, and I have to say that part of the interest also paralleled an interest in hyperbolic geometry, which is the geometry you would use, say, to describe the surface of a lettuce leaf, non-Euclidean geometry. And it turns out that a lot of the leading mathematicians in the world crochet models of hyperbolic space because it's a more direct and maybe simpler way to do it than making very difficult computer modeling. But a very important part of this project is early on, Margaret and Christine put out an invitation to collaborators, which was posted online, and many, many people responded. In fact, over the last 16 years now, over 10,000 people have participated in the Crochet Coral Reef Project in over 40 cities around the world, creating 40 separate reef projects. And the actual coral reefs around the world, of course, are in a precarious state right now because the rising temperature of ocean waters caused by global warming is causing many of them to die off. And in the Arsenale here, you will see a couple of the reefs, the models of the reefs that are on display are white. They're what are referred to as bleached reefs. They lose their color when they start to die. And I think this project, besides touching on mathematics and climate science, is also looking at, say, the effects of industrial pollution, specifically plastic waste that ends up in the ocean. I don't know if this was well publicized here, but the Guardian newspaper in the UK recently ran a study, or there was published the results of a study that showed that we all have microparticles of plastic in every body of water on Earth, including all of our drinking water, which means we all have microparticles of plastic inside of us, and that even a newborn baby will be born with microparticles of plastic in their bloodstream. So this is the world we're making, where maybe the difference between, what's human and what's not human is changing. So Margaret, I'm going to hand over to you.
Do I need to do anything to make it switch on there? What's that? How do I make, they've got to make my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay.
But are we in the way?
No. I just got to make sure that I can see. Yeah, if we could dim the lights a bit, that would be groovy. If we could dim the lights as much as possible, that would be fantastic. So, thank you very much, Ralph, for that elegant introduction and for having us be part of the Biennale. It is a true honour. As Ralph said, I'm going to be talking today about our Crochet Coral Reef project, which is a project that resides at the intersection of art and science and mathematics, craft, environmentalism and feminism. That's a lot. But what I want to focus on today in my little part of the talk is the mathematics behind the project and what I see as some interesting implications of the mathematics for not only how we think about mathematics in relation to humans, but how we think about mathematics in relation to nature and other living, not necessarily sentient organisms. So, sorry, it's not, okay. The subtitle of my talk is, Does a Sea Slug Know Hyperbolic Geometry? And I hope to convince you today that the answer is yes. I'm terribly sorry, I have to stop here because what is showing up on my screen is not what is showing up on there, and I have no idea where I am.
Just keep going until you get to what you need. People can look at the images and
Well, I have no idea where I am. This is not behaving remotely.
Well, just keep going until you get where you want to be.
Well, I want to be. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's always the case that technology. Okay, so basically, I want to talk about, it's not happening. It's not, the thing is, it's not responding. I'm pushing the keys and it's not responding. Oh, is it better if I use that? Excellent. Okay, right, here we go. But I'm sorry about this. Okay. I think we're there. Okay, so I want to ask the question, does a sea slug know hyperbolic geometry? But before I get into that in particular, just let's see a few of the forms that have been a part of this project in various incarnations. These ones are from the Venice Biennale. This is the bleached reef that Ralph pointed out later. And as you can see, there are all these frilly, curly forms. And what they all are is manifestations of hyperbolic geometry. Something is going badly wrong. I can't control this thing. So basically what happens is we put together these giant installations made from lots of individual pieces, all of which are crocheted invocations of hyperbolic geometry. And I'll get in a minute to what hyperbolic geometry actually is, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the scale of some of the work. Sorry, Marie, it's going backwards and forwards randomly.
The fact is that this is not plugged there. It was just for you as a note, you remember.
Okay. Thank you. If you could. Right. Okay. So, as Ralph said, part of our project is crocheted out of yarn and part of it is crocheted out of plastic. This one here on the left is yarn, this one on the right is plastic. These ones here are all plastic. Now I want to show you something extraordinary. This is what you see with the forms when you have normal light, natural light or general gallery light. This form here is one that it's exactly the same thing as that pink one in the middle. And we've just installed it in a new exhibition where it's lit under lights that were specially developed for illuminating aquariums. Sorry, Ralphie, this is not working. I'm not being able to have control over this. This one is illuminated under special aquarium lights, and what you see is it immediately becomes like this glowing fluorescent thing. And the scientists who developed this fluorescent lighting system explained to me that the reason that it is difficult to photograph some of our work is for precisely the same reason that it's difficult to photograph work, to photograph actual coral reefs, because the chemistry of the materials that we use is actually fluorescing, particularly the plastics, is actually fluorescing in the same way that underwater creatures, particularly corals, fluoresce. So we've been struggling with the problem of how to get the precise kind of images we want, and it now turns out that we've recapitulated the problem of nature, and actually what we need to do is to get an underwater photographer to actually come and photograph the work for us. So this scientist who invented these special marine lights is going to come and work with us to do that. The project comes out of a general philosophy that my sister and I have been working with for some years, which is basically, we started a little practice that we call the Institute for Figuring. And the purpose of our practice is to basically try to engage people with science and mathematical ideas through material play practices. What we're interested in is an engagement between art and science, which isn't about bringing art to science, but which is really about revealing the aesthetic and poetic dimensions that are in science and mathematics intrinsically. We basically do this through processes of letting people materially play with ideas, through actually constructing and making what are usually thought of as abstract things that are learned through equations and textbooks, but allowing people to play with them in their hands. Most of the projects that we've done deal with mathematics, and one of the questions that we are really interested in is, what does it mean to know mathematics? What do we actually think mathematical comprehension consists of? Now, most people think of it as symbolic, like I learned mathematics at university through textbooks and with writing down equations. But what our work is trying to do is say you can know and understand and engage with mathematics in a truly cognitive sense through practices by making and doing literally in your hands. So the particular subject that resides, the mathematical subject that we want to engage with in this project, is hyperbolic geometry, which is an alternative to the Euclidean geometry we learn about in school. And it turns out that although mathematicians spent hundreds of years trying to prove that this geometry was impossible, lots of creatures have been making it for hundreds of millions of years, including lettuce leaves and kales, cactuses, and particularly coral reef organisms. This is a sea sponge that's a biological manifestation of hyperbolic geometry. And here's a whole taxonomy of hyperbolic corals. Turns out that in the sea, there's a whole vast taxonomy of hyperbolic creatures, including sea slugs. So a question that we come back to is, what does a sea slug know hyperbolic geometry? I would like to say that it does. It's not going to be able to write equations or pass university exams, but it's literally making hyperbolic surfaces in the fibres of its being. And I would claim, Chrissy and I would claim, that this is a form of genuine cognition. It's embodied cognition. Now, this is a statement by mathematicians who were at the beginning of developing hyperbolic geometry in the early 19th century. And as you can see from this statement, they were almost driven mad when they discovered this new mathematical structure, because they had thought that it wasn't possible because it violated one of Euclid's axioms, which was supposed to be the sine qua non of logical everything. It turns out that the geometry that we're talking about here, hyperbolic geometry, is an alternative to two geometries, both of which you all actually know very well. One is Euclidean, the geometry of a flat plane that we learn at school, and the other is the geometry of the surface of a sphere, if you think about a beach ball and how it behaves. If you draw lines on a beach ball, it behaves very differently than it behaves, say, on a flat plane. Now, there are lots of different ways of characterizing these three geometries, but the easiest one is to basically look at it in terms of curvature. A Euclidean surface is flat, that makes sense, doesn't it? A spherical surface, like a beach ball, is curved, and mathematicians characterize it as positive. So if we can have positive curvature, zero curvature, can we have something called negative curvature? And it turns out that we can, and that's what hyperbolic geometry is. In a way, it can be conceived of as the geometric analogue of negative numbers. But what does that mean? Well, again, there are different ways of describing this, but the easiest way is to think of how you can fill the different surfaces with shapes. So on a Euclidean surface, I can fill it completely with hexagons. We all see this on bathroom floors. if I want to make an analogue of this with the sphere, I have to replace some of the 6-sided ones with 5-sided ones. So I'm literally taking out some sides, therefore taking away space, and it draws it in on itself. If I want to do, but if you think about that, if I can replace some 6-sided ones with 5-sided ones, and as it were, take away space, what happens if I replace some 6-sided ones with 7-sided ones? I make more space. It literally adds in space to the structure. And this is what a hyperbolic surface is. It's really an excess of surface. Now, you can make models of these with paper, and I have run lovely workshops where I do this, and it's really gorgeous, but they're rather fiddly to make and tricky to handle. The easiest way for humans to make models of hyperbolic geometry is to crochet them. And that was a discovery that was only made in 1993 by a mathematician at Cornell named Dr. Diana Taimina. Mathematicians for a long time after they discovered this didn't think they could make models of this. And Dr. Taimina came along in 1993 and said, you know what, guys, I can do it with knitting and crochet. And one of the things that's beautiful about these is that you can literally stitch mathematical theorems onto the surface and demonstrate things like that in hyperbolic geometry, parallel lines can diverge. The angles of a triangle don't add up to 180 degrees, they add up to less. The circumference of a circle in hyperbolic geometry isn't 2 pi r, it's more than 2 pi r. Now, when I learned these things at university, we had to take it on faith as purely abstract. But with Dr. Taimina's models, you can actually show, literally, the tactile truth of abstract mathematical propositions. They literally become sensible to you. So one of Chrissy and my arguments here is we're interested in how sensibility can lead to sensibility. That literally be able to sense things can actually, in your hands, to feel them, to touch them, can lead to making sense in your mind. Dr. Taimina's one, this is a mathematically perfect one done by one of our contributors, but if you want to make a perfect one like Dr. Taimina does, you simply follow a simple crochet algorithm, crochet n stitches increase 1 and keep going. So you can like crochet 3 stitches increase 1 and keep going, crochet 4 stitches increase 1. And if you do that, you always get a mathematically perfect hyperbolic. But there's only so much variety you can get with the mathematically precise ones. And our innovation with the crochet coral reef, and it was really Chrissy's innovation, was to say, one day after we'd been crocheting the mathematical ones, Chrissy came home and said, I'm sick of this, I want to branch out. And she came home with a bag of fluffy, sparkly yarns and said, I'm going wild. And I'm a scientist, so I thought, oh, well, you know, we should stick to the formula. And Christine said, well, you do that, darling, I'm going for it. And as soon as she started going wild and deviating, like sometimes she'd crease 1 every 2, then 1 every 3, then what about 1 every 10, and then do a bit of a flat bit. As soon as she started deviating, they began to look like living forms rather than mathematical models. And we had a little group of them sitting on our coffee table one night after Chrissy had been doing this for a day or so. And they looked like a coral reef. And Chrissy uttered the phrase, we could crochet a coral reef. And she likes to remind me that was in the conditional tense. But we thought, wouldn't it be great if we did a project to crochet a coral reef, and we could use it to bring attention to the fact that coral reefs around the world, particularly the beloved barrier reef in the state where we grew up, were being killed off by global warming. And it could bring attention to the global warming issue while we were engaging communities in doing a beautiful handicraft and also engaging them with the foundations of mathematics. But what we hadn't been prepared for is that as we began to explore, as it were, the domain of feral mathematics, aberrant mathematics, deviations from the formula, things began to evolve in ways we hadn't expected. People started to send forms that we could never have imagined. And what we began to realise was that there was an ever-evolving crochet taxonomic tree of life. And this, in a way, is like, as it were, a version of, it's sort of like an experimental version of Darwinian evolution, because we're literally, as a community, all starting from the same simple formula, crochet end stitches, increase 1, and then everybody goes off on their own way, and one day you wake up and you realise you've got something like peacocks and giraffes. So we think of this as a project in applied evolutionary theory, but it's also, I'd like to say, a project in applied mathematics, because each one of these forms has an algorithm underlying it that could be written out as the stitch pattern, just as all life on Earth is underlined by a DNA code that could be written out. So our forms are underlined by a code that could be written out. Each one of these forms could be described by things like differential equations, but we don't choose to do that. We're interested in the exploration of the form. But for me, what is most important about this is that it says that you can do this mathematics, you can do mathematical exploration in your hands, in your body, feeling it, sensing your way to really quite profound mathematical truths. So I want to make the claim that mathematics is actually a bit like music. Just as music is something that can be written out and read through formal symbols, so too music, for most of us, is something that can be played out. And mathematics is a bit like that too. There is the symbolic representations of mathematics, which is what you learn at university. But our form, this form of mathematics, is a playing out of music, a playing out of mathematics, which I see as an analogue of the playing out of music. So thanks very much, and sorry about the tech problem.
Can I just make one comment, because I know we're running behind? Sorry about the technical. It's all right. I'd just like to add two very brief remarks. As Margaret said when we started out, I simply deviated from perfection, and from then on, everybody who contributed, in some sense, deviated in their own ways. So what the ultimate, as Ralph said, 40 coral reefs that exist now, and plus we have another 10 of our own, have been built up, this unbelievable variation of forms, is from just individuals making minor deviations. And what I like to say is that even though life on Earth may have genuinely been produced by an overarching designer who makes decisions, our project is actually genuine material proof that it is possible to produce whole ecologies with multivarious forms. That is to say, it is possible to produce evolution through random deviation without there being an overarching designer, because we don't tell people what to do. We just say, this is the formula, do what you like. And they deviate, and that is what has produced the variety. And the other thing I'd like to say is, Margaret talks about the fact that you can do mathematics through playing with your hands, and I'd just like to make an analogue with the word knowledge. In our culture, we think of knowledge as something that is related to intellect and all those things that go with intellect, such as maybe writing and symbolic notations, etc., etc. But there's another kind of intelligence and knowledge that all human beings have, which is what I'm going to just call practical knowledge. And that's the knowledge that you get through making and doing. Our culture does not generally valorise that kind of knowledge. We valorise the knowledge that you learn in universities. But you can acquire just as much knowledge, and if not possibly more useful knowledge, by practically doing things. And one of the things that our project is showing is that you can acquire even mathematical knowledge by practically doing. And given that our culture is so head-heavy, I think that, we need to start, we divide people into we send people to universities, or we send them to what used to be called trade school. And we don't have trade schools anymore, or actually they do in agricultural industry, and we disparage that kind of knowledge as if they're the people who aren't good enough to go to university, but that isn't true. The people who there are geniuses and masters of practical knowledge, and in fact many so-called ordinary people are masters and geniuses of practical knowledge, of different kinds of practical knowledge, and I believe that our culture needs to really start valorising practical knowledge in a much more profound way.
Hello, yes. Thank you for all coming here for such a beautiful presentation. Super inspiring. Thank you, Ralph, Manuela, and all the amazing team of the Biennale. Yes, I will really need your guidance because I really prepare a presentation that somehow it can run smoothly in 20 minutes, but I always destroy the last minute. And this means I will be jumping from a mobile phone app to some images here. This means it will be really an exercise of feeling uncomfortable somehow, and this means you can fill the gaps and maybe ask questions in between, and then kind of we break. But yes, I promise 20 minutes will be the session. This means I need 5 minutes before to try to wrap it up. If we manage, who was the person? Maria is in the room. Yes. Okay. This means please, maybe, but stand in the front or make strong signs when the 5 minutes are coming. And a little bit, what I thought also was a little bit think about how it started, this invitation. I remember when Ralph and then also I think Manuela played a key role. We said, okay, what to do in the Biennale, and then was a little bit what I did again today morning. We start to walk, and I have been obsessed by spider webs and spiders, and it's a little bit what I also thought with the introduction of Ralph today, who is in the audience today. There are a lot of humans, but there are a lot of spiders also. And the first thing that we did, I just walk around the corner, and if you look very careful, and I left the mobile phone on, but here there is an amazing Folcus spider right on that corner, which might be hearing us. I don't know. But they talk and they hear and they vibrate quite amazing. Here there is another one which is quite beautiful. And this is a little bit the idea of, yeah, I think I could not hear you. This is in the audience there are not only humans, but there are a lot of spiders and spider webs who vibrate quite beautifully. And then I show you a little bit how what I'm talking and the vibration that I'm putting up into the air, these waves, might also resonate. And if we really pay attention, there are some frequencies. Do you think so? I can put up the telephone, if possible. This means you will really need to bear a little bit. No, not this one. Okay. There we are. Yes. Okay. When are you ready, you tell me. Anyway, what you will see is a tuning fork. This means this tuning fork is really tuned to a very special frequency, which is, and I'm not so good in science, but I think it's between 412 hertz at up to, I don't remember exactly which is the frequency. And when you do like this, and then you put it next to, you tell me when the video is, sorry? Mirroring up, okay. You want to come and show me? Don't worry. Yeah, thank you. I want to play that one. Anyway, what you see in the video is I do like this. You put it next to the web, and the spider come to you. Really unbelievable. She feels because this tuning fork is more or less is an average between what a cricket will shake the web, what a fruit fly, and whatever. And this means she really senses that vibration and usually really get confused and you think so, yeah, a mosquito or a fly or whatever, and then she comes. This has been based a little bit on that. We then was this passion about where are these spider webs, and then with Ralph, I think so, we start to get the idea that we want to try to think about this. Should not be in the back. Come in the front. A ver, fax. Will you help me? I have an amazing team, fax and Dario. This mean. One idea was to think how we can have this practice of noticing, no, where the spider are. And this means we start to walk in the Giardini, we start to find like there are millions, and I think so because it's very old, the Venice Biennale, there are so many webs entangled in every single pavilion. And somehow, you know, it started to grow these ideas like how we could kind of give voice to these kind of, and I think it's also what beautiful what Ralph said is like, because everybody think of like, okay, is it nature here? I mean, this column is a tree, right? It's not really a tree, it's kind of an architecture. And this, I mean, what it helped me a lot about thinking about the spider web and the webs is about thinking about this idea that the webs appear much more entangled in places that you really do not expect, right? And this, I mean, each of us somehow have also these spider webs in our own homes. And this, I mean, from them, maybe we give it up, this, and then we put just the presentation, if it do not work, the phone. If you want, wow, amazing. Beautiful. Okay, then how we do? Yeah, but this is purely my fault, all of this. I cannot blame anybody. Okay, there we go. This means maybe we lie down a little bit the light. It was kind of beautiful before. Then we focus a little bit on that. This means what we decided to do is this, another thing. Then we discovered somebody at Oxford who is a specialist on spider divination. This means there is a tribe between Cameroon and Nigeria who really kind of use still as a juridical system, ask questions to the spiders. And when the spider, and they put in front of the spider, there are spiders who do not make webs. You have to think that some spiders make webs, some do not make webs. They live in a hole, in a kind of, under the ground. They cover it up, and then it comes this kind of interpreter or spider diviner. They put some beautiful cards in front of the spider, and then they ask a binary question. And then if they, but also like is Ralph guilty to commit a crime, you could ask. And if the spider say yes, and for 7 times different spider said yes, he go to jail. Right? This, I mean, I love this idea of agency, but I mean, you know, right, in the moment of completely the 6 max extinction, give back, you know, it's like a spider could send to jail Trump, right? You know what I mean? For not you know, ratify the Paris Agreement, right, of climate change. This means spider really can have this juridical court. And now you have to think another things that I'm completely entangled. Their world, in the way how we are judging also the way we think to protect something which really don't understand at all, is quite difficult if we keep applying our own laws to try to understand other parts of ourselves, which I'm really in favor of trying to think that we are part of nature and we have to redefine humanism. And this means in the case that everybody know the black widow, the Vedova Nera, right? What happened with the black widow? After mating, it's okay for spider to kill your husband, right? I mean, that's right. This means if we start to, there is another very cruel, and I will tell you, it can get very weird and very wild if you have to think about their point of view and their law, how law could be built according to them. There are other spiders which, when they have offspring and they have a lot of tiny small baby spider, all the spider crawl in the back of the mother, right? And there are hundreds of them. And what they eat first when they start to grow? The mother. It's crazy, right? I mean, you have to think it's like, yeah, for us it's completely outrageous, right? It's something which we could not believe. But the behavior of the spider, and we're still thinking and judging others from our legal perspective point of view, I think so we're not going anywhere also at the same time. And we see the way how we relate with them because we still believe that is a human-centric point of view of how law is made. Has been which we should really try to change. This means This is an app you can download for free. It looks like I'm selling a vacuum cleaner, but I'm very, very happy of it. Try it yourself. But one thing which made me incredibly happy is that we put up this map. I don't see. Let me see. Maybe fax. I need help again because it's not getting there. Mm-hmm. Okay, if it works or not, but if you want to try Zarachnomancy, then you download here, and there have been, since the opening of the Biennale, the idea is like you choose a card, you make a question to the spider web, and think about one thing. We kind of redefine the term, we call it spider/web. I'm really in favor about this idea of embodied entangled cognition. This means the extension of the spider do not end like the taxonomy and science somehow is dividing, but we are trying to incorporate the web as part of the body of the spider. Is again, the Anthropocene is the kind of the behavior of certain human when they get decoupled maybe from what they call nature. This means all part of the project is all the time this effort to, if you want facts and try to fix that thing. Okay, thank you. Guarda, se fai zoom così non funziona. Yeah, I know. Sorry. But something which I'm extremely proud, maybe we pass by to the presentation because the phone, I think, so is not really a happy connection. We pass through the presentation directly. Maybe I'm already time to move on, but anyway, the beautiful app, what you find is a lot of dots all around. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. This is started the day of the opening of the Biennale, and what you see now is, for example, you click here and all people start to discover spiderweb pavilion everywhere somehow. It's kind of very, very beautiful through this idea of questioning, trying to find out your future by asking questions to the spider. And then in this process you have to take picture. Well, I'm very, very happy. Look, I'm from Argentina, and I think so my father also, my family have been trying to use. These are all the pictures that people have started to take picture of the web. And then we are talking now with the world director of Arachnology Society to try really expand this idea of caring. If I go back now to the video that I wanted to show you before. 1 second. These are my friends. It's kind of weird. Okay, there we are. Look at this. You see? And she started to wrap it up because she really thinks it's a cricket or something like this. She gets really, really... it's like a dinner bell. Yeah, it's a dinner bell. Yeah. I show you another one who she produced a quite a different pattern. Look, now we just have made a call with a bell and then she kind of start to shake the web. You have to think, for example, for the Cytophora citricola, they want to make the male produce all this vibration to the web that it up to lose 30% his of body weight to try to, this means get very, very, very thin of all the effort and exercise that it make to do this. Okay, that was a little bit of an introduction. Now we go back to the if we can watch the screen of the computer, please. And it becomes a little bit of a mea culpa of coming up here. In the sense of, I'm getting more serious if we try to think and feel about who is living with us and who is us and how we can kind of move out of the human-centric perspective of the cohabitation or the possibility to cohabitate into this planet. Yeah, I'm happy to go through. Okay, today I landed by plane collecting more points of shames on my golden card of carbon emission. Today I landed, and then I have to move here, sorry. Sorry, I will need to do in synchro. Okay? One second. Okay. In order to find out how many points I visit the atmosphere in order to calculate the carbon emission of my flight. Put in Berlin and Venice, I found out and maybe I put it up here, that with this flight I have emitted 395 kilograms of CO2. In order to limit global warming to only 2 degrees, scientists have calculated that each of us must limit our annual carbon emission to 2,300 kilograms. And then I need to, per year, right? Fax, maybe you come and help me. You press, because it could be so fantastic that then I can, you press here and I press here because I have to do two things at the same time. It's kind of crazy. And then let's synchro. Let's see if it goes better. There we are. Does it mean I'm in this slide here? No. Yeah, this one. Then I go to next one. Yeah, okay. 390 in order to do global warming. Then we are, even the clothes that I'm wearing today have a carbon footprint. Our impact on the atmosphere invade every part of our life. The journey to Venice between my flight and the clothing is already more than 20% of my annual carbon footprint. This means what I'm trying to think is really if 20% of my whole footprint that I can emit in 1 year is coming up here, I will be quite tough now where and how I have to go if I keep coming by plane, right? Don't change the clothes for the rest. Yeah, nobody wants to sit next to the plane. Then later, this means the plane will be less full, and I think some more carbon emission will happen. I don't know. You get to this very weird calculation. Yeah, maybe. We are here. Already met 20%. With my trip, I added more CO2 in the air, contributing to the increase of invisible noxious clouds of CO2 and other pollution that overpopulated the air, displacing, disrupting, and dishabiting the visible nature clouds that will help us to regulate the Earth temperature and keep the Earth at the surface, cool the surface of the Earth. Hula, there is so much text to read. How much time I have there? Like 2-3 minutes more? 10 minutes. Okay, not so bad. Now, there is a beautiful analogy, which is an article in the New York Times, and then I try to speed it up, which make really kind of correlation. It seems like, for example, a car trip from New York to Miami, it diminished the lifespan of somebody else living in another place of the planet for maybe, I don't remember, was a month of life. When you take a transatlantic flight, you diminish the lifespan of somebody else living on the planet there for 2 years. It does mean every time you take a planet, you are killing the lifespan of somebody else, and usually are the ones who do not have the same access that you have, right? Let's remember, in India when you have this, a lot of people who, you have air condition, you have a mask, but many people do not have the capacity to have an air condition and mask infiltrate the earth. This is really bring out this climate inequality to an increasing inequality in the way, which I'm completely against the term Anthropocene, right? I think so we should all the time talking about the term Capitolcene, right? Is a way of form of life and behaving which is disrupting. And there are 26 people on planet Earth who have the wealth of 0.5% of the population, according to the last Davos, right? This means there are 26 people with name and last name who are producing a huge disruption, and then still, when we talk is about like the we, no? It's like a human disappearing. I think so, human will disappear, yes. Many who do not have access of the life type that the other ones are suffering, the consequence. And for sure, these 26 people will not disappear. But yes, some spiders, yes. And as we can see also, many other species also disappear at a huge rate. So we have to put really the temporary frame of the disappearance in relationship to the access of the way of living. With the studio, we are working on finding our alternative to send the CO2 footprint, which is why we launched the Aerosync project. We began in 2007 by asking ourselves simple questions. The journey toward the realization of Aerosync began with a collaborative, and then I love your work because this idea of stitching knowledge and form of practice, I think so, is something which I really was touched. And it started as 2007, was called Museo Aerosolar, and together with Alberto Pesavento, we started collecting used plastic bags. We wash them, we dry them, we cut them, we paste them, we create a gigantic canvas, and we form this kind of volume of air. And when the sun comes from the horizon and this volume of air get warmer, the flying museum get into the air. And it keep growing as much as more plastic bags are happening. I think this is similar of the other project. We just put up the instruction online and kind of this start flying museum or Museo Aerosolare, we call it, start to appear everywhere around the world, and then people kind of copy, paste, reproduce. It's okay, these slides. The principle is very simple. It's just like a thing that you can float yourself at the bottom of ocean of air. Like Torricelli said, the student of Galileo, no? We live at the bottom of ocean of air, which I think so is very beautiful. And this means to float up into the air. I think so we go after one. No, one, no, before? Yeah, here. You don't need, any type of fuel to usually a hot air balloon, you have a burner who produce a lot of heat. You don't need solar panel batteries, helium or hydrogen to become airborne to a certain extent. And we keep moving. This backpack also is presented here in the vitrine in front of the Venice Biennale, and then we start to kind of practice all these ideas of how we could get out of the addiction we have on fossil fuel. This was back in 2015. We launched the world's first fully powered aerosolar vehicle in New Mexico in USA. 7 passengers without any propane or fuel for 2 hours and 15 minutes. The first ever done longer flights of its kind, and hope the future will travel without a carbon emission. This was a world record that, as you can see, there is no any burner up into the way of lifting people up into the air. These are other images where we are trying to use a reflective fall to have more gain of heat when it's a little bit cloudy. I think so we keep, these are other prototypes who will be able to travel day and night. What we will try now is to imagine, and maybe we do next. Okay, some of them we let them free fly, and this means when usually is in Berlin near Schönefeld, which is not Schönefeld where the airport is, and they fly for 12 hours, 605 kilometers, and we cover 600 kilometers. This means is quite a journey. And then I'm asking myself, and with MIT we develop a program, is like what it will take if I will come from Berlin to Venice with burning fossil fuel. And we developed a tool which is called the floating predictor. You can go online, it's also free. And I'm taking off from Berlin, and to arrive to Venice, I make a round the world, and then I come to Venice. Does it mean more or less, let me read it here. Taking off from Berlin, I could land 161 kilometers from Venice, and it take me 9 days. Which is kind of beautiful, right? Now, what you could do, and I will not try now to go to the phone, the wind at different altitude blows in different direction. This is a journey at 10,000 meters. This means where the aeroplanes goes. This means now we say, oh, the collision of aeroplane. I'm trying, with all this sculpture, all this backpack, is trying to get back this kind of reappropriation of the air and reappropriation of the sky, not held only by huge multinational companies and whatever it might be, right? It's quite of a provocation also to start to occupy other spaces. We usually are occupied with a very strong technology in that case, right? Anyway, we do it consciously. I mean, you need an insurance, which costs €2 million. Every time you launch one of these balloons, the insurance is only €100 per day, and blah, blah. And I can tell you a lot of things that we have moved forward towards the capacity of people to occupy space which have been occupied by other people. This means in this case, what you could do also, if you want to not make around the world to come to Venice, you change the altitude. Remember, the wind at different altitude blow in different direction. This means if you, in this case, it's 10,000 meters, you go very fast. The jet streams usually are there, quite fast wind, but usually they blow always in one direction. If you go down to maybe 5,000 meters, then very likely you got wind which might blow south. Anyway, the trip from Europe to the south and Argentina, where I come, partially is quite complicated because cross the equatorial zone is very, very complicated. You have to do a multi-stop journey. Now, what you could do in the program also is what it tells you when is the best day for you to take off. I mean, if you today book a ticket, usually it tells you what is the cheapest day, a high cost for other species or other people, right? What we have learned from before. I mean, what the program tell you when is the best day within 16 days, where more or less we can try to predict and forecast the weather, when the wind will take you to that destination. This means when you run the computer, we say, oh, I want to go to Venice, they tell you, in 5 days, most likely, the wind will take you to that destination. This means it's a lot of practicing of, I'm doing a lot of meditation now, and try to slow down and calm and wait for the right moment, right? But it's quite exciting, and it should not be depressive and, you know what I mean? We have to build that passion, that enthusiasm, that waiting is very okay, you know what I mean? You could do many other things while you wait, right? But we gonna need these different rhythms, no? A way of attuning to other things. Now, Fax, maybe you help me again, or maybe the time is gone. Yeah, or maybe a pick-up question. We leave it there? Yeah, thank you.
We all succeeded, Ralph, in spite of the technology.
Well, I know for a talk about science and technology and art, what else could you expect? We might have to share this one. I think I've lost mine. It seems to be on. So, a couple of questions. I mean, one thing that I just noticed, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that your works are branching out into fields related to science, is an issue around the idea of authorship. And on one level, you're both doing collective projects where the idea there's no single author. And I think this idea of the single author is very connected to this idea of the human as a kind of intelligent agent with the ability to make meaningful choices that somehow is the only thing like that in the entire world, that other systems don't have those properties or entities. Tomás, you've also created what is the first non-human pavilion in the Venice Biennale history, the Spider Pavilion. And I think, for me, that was also a very important moment, an idea that's related to questioning this idea of the human and who gets representation in this kind of an event. But it also brings up this idea of authorship. Who's the author of this, divination?
No, and also is because every, something you said before, it was quite beautiful. I think so, in relation with authorship and the comfort zone of every discipline, I feel if we are very successful in the art world today, it's a complete failure. Because the narrative that every discipline, being in his own silo, is succeeding, is the one that is bringing mass extinction. I think so we should really work it out. What are the limits of being uncomfortable in your own discipline to try to find narratives that are very different of the narrative that we are hearing today? Look America and what science is conveying. It's a huge country saying that the global warming and climate change do not exist. Not science are succeeding, nor art is succeeding. I think so none is really succeeding to a certain extent. And we are not hearing the one that really are attuned. I mean, look what happened in the Amazon forest today, right? There's over 1 million population left being displaced. We do not have civil rights, and they are very well attuned, right, with the way of being attuned with the planet. I mean, when it goes to the authorship, it was very simple. When I said to Ralph, it's like people usually, because they see all these webs and the attention that we are giving to them, and every time that you go to your home, you say, oh, Tomás, I saw a spider web at my home, can you sign it, because this is an artwork, right? People all the time will take pictures, send it to me, and trying to ask that I will give them the permission that this spider web, which is living in their house, become an artwork. And this is why came up the idea of this application. This means when you take a picture at your home, you find a spider web, you start to notice. No, is this Anna saying the art of noticing? And then you realize that you live with somebody else, or somebody else live with you in your house. And then you start to negotiate, which is the territory when it starts and end nature. You know what I mean? And most of people, they stop brooming it out.
Well, it brings up this whole question, whose house is it? And then maybe you start to think of it as a shared house, just like whose planet is it? Margaret, do you want to add something?
On the question of authorship, I think this is a really big one because, in our project, when we do the reefs with the communities, we've had up to 1,000 people participate, and it can be very difficult to get institutions to accept that and to list them all as authors of the work. And we've often had to fight very hard to get our contributors actually named in the gallery spaces. But one of the, that really, really surprised me, but it seems like the whole structures of our society in general are really geared towards, my name here and that being a singular thing. But one of the things that's really come to interest me lately is this multi-authorship thing that we've been doing is actually very similar to what's playing out in the science world now. Because although the mythology of science is, that theories or projects are done by one person, Newton, Einstein, that's actually become really a very past model. So almost all science now is done by vast teams. So a good example is the discovery of the Higgs boson. It's estimated that 10,000 people, scientists and engineers, ultimately were responsible for that. Now, only 3 of them won the Nobel Prize, because that's the limit of the Nobel Prize committees. So there are huge arguments in the history of science, and people who are disgruntled as the 4th or 5th one, why didn't they get? But the reality is that most science now is done by huge teams. In fact, I have a friend at Caltech who works on the gravity wave experiment, and he once said to me, he said, it's not a joke, that sometimes he had 3,000 co-authors on his paper, and that the list of the authors was actually longer than the paper itself. And it seems to me we should actually embrace this model. What we do together is bigger and better and more wonderful than what we can do as individuals, and that's what we like about the reef.
In terms of the arts and the sciences, the scientists have already, and particularly the mathematicians, embraced the idea of collective authorship. And in the arts, so is the film industry. If you look at any film these days, there's thousands and thousands of people, every single one who's named. But and I agree with Tomás that it's not just the people. But I just want to say, just give you a little example of one thing that happened in one of our reefs. I found I found anyway, and I wanted to incorporate into our reef a whole bunch of factory-made pieces of crochet that were factory-made in China, and I incorporated them into our reef. And because I don't know who made them exactly, I don't know their names, but I do know that they were made by workers in factories in China, so I included in the list of our contributors unknown, unnamed Chinese factory workers. And initially the museums would not let me. It was one thing to have non-famous ordinary people's names on the wall, but it was another thing to have anonymous Chinese factory workers written on the wall. And I thought about it, in the end the museums will now let us list them. But I thought about it afterwards and I thought, actually, every work that we do, every work that anybody does on the whole planet now, includes components made by unknown Chinese factory workers, because all the wool that we use, all the wire that we use, all the needles that we use to make the stitching, all of those are made in factories in China. I have huge boxes of labels that says made in China. Everybody's work now, I don't care what you do, you are working with stuff that was, collaboratively with stuff that was made by unnamed Chinese factory workers.
Thanks, Chrissy. Maybe we should open it up to questions. Are there anyone in the audience? There are 2 microphones that can go around, so wait till you get the microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Andreff. I want to thank all of you for your excellent presentations. I'd like to come back, Ralph, to the beginning, and you made a comment. In fact, riding over here today on the train, I read the Times, and there was an article about Jane Goodall talking about 97% same DNA in human beings as in chimpanzees, and the fact 1 million species will die now in the next coming period because of what humans have done. Because we're only 300 years old, as you had said, something along those lines, are we now reflecting art as it is today? Is art reflecting the world as it is today, or can art actually help us look to the future or find a way to educate people about the future so we would make these changes that were so well made by Tomás? Thank you.
I would have to say yes. I think that's what the artists here on the stage are doing, and other artists, including in the exhibition Annika Yi, whose work in the Central Pavilion is part of a project called Biologizing the Machine, where she's trying to create artificial intelligence entities that can learn through their connection with organic living materials. And I think what's interesting to me is that this is happening more, it seems, in the world of art than in the world of academia, and that hopefully these projects can open up the kind of closed culture that exists in academia and create a different kind of discourse.
We often get asked this question, does our project actually change anything? And what I can say is doing the project has certainly changed Chrissy and my own practice, particularly our relationship and use of plastic. When we first started crocheting plastic, we decided that it wasn't enough just to do an artwork, that we should do something practical in our own lives. So the first thing we should do is become aware. So we kept all of our plastic, domestic plastic, for a week, and we were horrified, and we kept it for a month, and we were appalled. And so we then ultimately ended up keeping all our domestic plastic trash for 4 years.
Which means, by the way, that
you have to wash it.
Wash it all, and that's the nightmare.
And to actually live with your own plastic trash, there's nothing like having to wash it and keep it and rewash it to make you really think about what you bring home from the store. And now 4 years of our plastic trash actually gets exhibited as an artwork. And I'd actually like to see everybody do this. I mean, maybe not for 4 years, but try doing it yourself, try keeping it for a week. So the project's changed our practice. Does it change anyone else's? I don't know, but I think that art and journalism are in a similar category to this, that they both have the power to bring attention to things, and that is real power. And I think change slowly happens as attention is brought to problems, and that's hopefully what we're all contributing to.
I think it depends what issues you're talking about. But I think there are many different issues when you say, can art change anything? So I'm just going to talk about one thing. Vis-a-vis what Tomás's project with the air balloons is about, how can we travel without continuing to pollute the earth by using fossil fuels? So we all know now that the pollution of overconsumption of everything is producing a massive change on our planet. I'll just tell you a little fact. 97, not carbon emissions, but rubbish that goes into the ground, in landfills or into the sea, 97% of it is produced in the production of products. Only 6% of rubbish is produced by the consumption. So the main problem of global warming, apart from flying, on the Earth is not that we overconsume, but that we overproduce. Obviously, the only way to stop production is to stop consumption. And one way to stop consumption and to stop production is for us to learn how to do things that we make ourselves that are not produced in industrially made ways. So can art teach us anything? Yes, art can inspire you that you can make things yourself. Like you can make your own air balloon and you can actually technically use your air balloon to fly to wherever. You can actually make all sorts of things like your own sweaters, your own socks. I mean, you still have to buy the wool. It's made in a factory which has 97% of its wastage too. But nevertheless, you can cut down by learning to make. And I think one of the things about art that is really inspiring to me, it's not the conceptual side of it, it's the making side. And art can inspire people and even possibly help teach them how to make stuff and therefore cut down on the industrial production, which is the real problem of pollution outside of the carbon emissions.
Do we have another question?
Yes, hello. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is directed to Mr. Rugoff, but I'd like to know all of your opinions, if I may. You spoke at the beginning of the limit between human intelligence and artificial and animal intelligence getting thinner and thinner. And I'd like to know what's your opinion about new kind of artists that are AIs made by the technology of the blockchain. Have you heard about it? What do you think about it? Both artistically and professionally as a curator. Thank you.
These are AI entities that make art. Yeah. All right. I have to say I don't know a lot about it, but I think one question I have is, can the AI entities feel? Do they have an emotional life? Because I think that's what art comes out of. It's not just a formal exercise. So until we have AIs that have an emotional dimension of their consciousness, I don't think they'll be making art that I'll be very interested in.
I think so. We are talking here, no, AI is maybe spiderweb intelligence, coral intelligence, and I think so we have been kind of trying to expand about other form of intelligences, another embody and extended cognition which go beyond, what intelligence might be, maybe, I don't know.
Can I actually I have on the whole thought that, AI art would be, ipso facto not very interesting. But actually I read about a really interesting AI project the other day. There's a woman I know who's an AI researcher, and she studies the way that AIs sort of go aberrant and do things that we don't really understand. And she also tries to code AI. She sets them tasks that are quite interesting. And she recently decided that she'd set AIs, she'd train them to read crochet patterns and then to write crochet patterns. And she said almost invariably they very quickly converged on doing hyperbolic crochet. The patterns that they wrote very quickly converged to do hyperbolic crochet. And she encouraged them in this direction. And eventually, after a couple of days of doing this, one of them came up with, the AI came up with a crochet pattern that was so hyperbolic that she calculated that the amount of yarn, because you increase and you get so much yarn, that it had so many stitches packed into this ball that it would weigh more than the universe and it would collapse immediately into a black hole.
Sounds like an interesting piece of art.
And I thought, this is the missing link between string theory and general relativity. The woman's discovered it.
I mean, I should say that Annika Yee, who was originally going to join us in Kent, I mean, she's now working on a project trying to give robots a biological interface so that they can learn from their environment physically, as biological creatures do, in order for robots to develop an intelligence apart from any human programming of their intelligence, to basically help them develop as an independent life form. And I think at that point, we might see art created by non-human entity that is related to artificial intelligence. That could be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know to keep on the. Yeah, I think, but anyway, when we talk about a vibration that the spider is able to sense and which frequency are going, we are working with MIT on trying to get all this huge archive of vibration, and based on that vibration, record the vibration and see how we can start to try to code a non-human language between interspecific communication among them. This means really try to understand what, when a dog is barking, what he's saying, right? There's a new Esperanto among different animals, and that's what I'm trying, the ultimate, and we are doing that. You have to think like, I mean, with this spider web thing, there is no science museum in the entire world who have a collection of spider webs. This means that was a huge contribution. We got 2 times published in Nature magazine, and we are doing a lot of these recordings that then later usually, and hopefully will help us to communicate, or they can versus, establish another dialogue.
One more question. Do we have one more question here? Okay.
Hello, my name is Valentino, and thank you everyone for working so hard for this amazing event. It's beautiful, and for the dialogue. I wanted to ask, because yesterday I went to the Giardini and I stayed there for 5 hours, which was amazing, and I thought that the best artwork it was when I was going out from Giardini at 5:45, I think, in the afternoon. Everyone walking in silence very slowly, alone or not, but very in love and very meditating, like a collective consciousness of dialogues, internal dialogues, or dealing with their own souls without maybe not knowing what to think. And I thought this was very, very amazing. I wanted to ask you, Ralph, as a curator, what was your personal emotions or feelings you want to transmit through such an amazing and huge event, curating. And yeah, so we can know deeper into that. Thank you.
It wasn't so much like there was some particular feeling other than an excitement and an enthusiasm for this spirit of open discussion and open conversation that art embodies. That you can look at things and have contradictory emotions that you think can't coexist. But that's the nature of who we are. I mean, we're not things that we don't make sense. We're not just homogeneous creatures psychologically or emotionally. And I think art reflects that complexity of who we are in a way that you don't see a lot in a lot of the commercial corporate produced culture that we see on television or we listen to on the radio is all about everything fitting together perfectly. It's a formula. And art doesn't work by formulas. And it allows a different kind of experience to happen that, for me at least, allows me to discover parts of myself I don't discover in encounters with other areas of culture or work life or whatever. So that, I hope, is exciting and maybe thought-provoking. Maybe all those people leaving were hopefully having a vapor trail of interesting thoughts as they left the building. Coming and spread the word about all these things the artists were talking about today, because because that's also how art works. All right, thank you very much.